Hello, my name is Michele, and you're listening to Profit is a Choice. Joining me on the podcast today is Kelcee Sparks with Elite Ops. She has been with us on some of the past podcasts that we're doing where we're answering the questions that you all have sent in. And today we're focusing on processes. So we're going to answer how to even get started, how to organize and structure where to put your processes. We're going to talk about who's going to help you write them and how to do them, and even just the importance and the mindset behind it. So lots of good information, and thank you for joining. Every day, empowered entrepreneurs are taking ownership of their company financial health and enjoying the rewards of reduced stress and more creativity. With my background as a financial software developer, owner of multiple businesses in the interior design industry, educator, and speaker, I coach women in the interior design industry to increase their profits, regain ownership of their bottom line, and to have fun again in their business. Welcome to Profit is a Choice. Hey, Kelcee, welcome back to the podcast.
Hi, Michele. Thanks for having me again.
You're welcome. All right. So we are going to continue our series of Q&A questions that people have asked when they're coming into the program or working with the program, or even people outside of the program that are sending us questions and going, hey, what's going on? And today I think we're focusing on processes.
Absolutely.
All right.
So this is one of my favorites.
Yes. Tell us why it's your favorite. Why is it your favorite?
Processes are my favorite parts of a business. I feel like there's so much opportunity in your processes and process improvement to make a big impact on your business with small changes. And I just love seeing that for business owners. So I love talking about this, and I love hearing what you have to say.
Well, and I'm going to give you a big shout out and a plug for what you do too. So you own a company called Elite Ops, and you do operations and administrative management and really processes all day long for designers and those in the design industry, and maybe some workroom industry, and then also industries outside of ours. And so when we're talking about a lot of these things, it really is near and dear to your heart. And you also have an engineering degree and a master's degree doing a whole lot of process development. And so I am so thankful to be able to have you and that amount of education supporting you and backing what I'm doing as well, and supporting my clients, our clients, right? Because we're working with them together, and I love that. So, all right, you ready? I'm going to ask the first question. Okay.
So the most common question that everyone asks, I can confidently say everyone, is where do I start? So I think people get really overwhelmed when they're thinking about their processes, and they want to know, where do they start attacking the idea of processes in their business? It feels overwhelming. They're not sure where to go first. They're not sure if their processes should be business focused, client focused, if they should have a combination of the two. Just what is that starting point? What do you recommend?
You know what? If I could just say, here's the perfect pathway, I would do that. But I am going to say that I think that it can be different for each business owner. So I want to invite a more strategic look at processes. Instead of moving to the tactical, what do I just sit and write? I'd like to suggest that we stop and think strategically. And that would be, and let me back up before I tell you how to do it. It is extremely overwhelming and can be, because what happens is when we think processes, almost every single person I've ever met with that had not been through, and even those that had been through an educational background surrounding processes, it is easy to find yourself in the minutia within a second. It's like a hot minute and you are in it, right? And then it feels like, oh my gosh, I'm so in the weeds, I'll never get out of this. It becomes so granular that we just cannot even see our way out. And so the first thing that I'm going to invite our listeners to do is to start very strategically. Start at the high level. Start identifying the areas of your company where you would like to document what is happening. Start at the tip top. To me, that's the strategy. Then the next thing I would think about is this. I would think about When I was doing it for myself, it was always, what am I doing next? And could I jot down bullet points for what I'm doing next? So if I was a solopreneur trying to get ready for that first hire, right, I'm going to have to be the one to create these. What I might do in a solo environment is go, what is one of the first things I'd like to hand off to somebody? Let me document that. Like, where is the hole or something that I need to hand off? How do I get it out of my brain and onto paper? I was speaking to a designer today, and one of the things she said was, I need to hire, but everything's in my head. And I said, well, unless you're going to sit beside somebody and drip information to them all day long, they can't get it through osmosis, which means we have to write it down. And so that's the first place I would start. High level. And then under the high level, bullet point. I would also sit down, and when they say, should I have processes for all those? My answer is the short answer. Yes, you should. Now, we might not have them all and can create them all at one time in one day. So I want to also offer that this is a process, and I know you would agree with that. This is a process, and I'm still tweaking. You're still tweaking. We're still updating processes today, but we have a framework. The framework starts with the highest level bullet points and then detailing under the bullet points. Honestly, the more that we think strategically, where's the big hole? Where's the big problem? Where's the difficulty? What do I need to hand off? Let that guide you into what you do next, instead of thinking that you want to define something just because it's easy and nobody needs it and it happens once a year and you've already done it. Like, I wouldn't start there. That it does seem easy. And if you're going to do that versus riding a bike or playing or doing, then sure, do it. But it's not going to be really it's not really going to affect your day to day. What do you think? What do you tell people? The same kind of thing, or do you?
Oh, absolutely. So the first thing we always do is we say, what are your big 3 to 5 buckets? Every business has 3 to 5 that they can come up with, and that's where we start. The other thing, kind of to add to what you were saying, is I think that it is so easy to get in the minutia. One of the things we always recommend is take a Loom video, or it may not be Loom, a screen recording of the process as you're doing it, and let someone else document it, because it's much easier for someone to watch a video and document for you than it is for you to document. It's easy to skip steps that you don't realize you're doing. It's easy to do some of those little things in the minutia that other people are going to catch because they don't do it every day.
Yeah, let's take that. And I'd like to move that a step further, because the question that I get is, who should be the one documenting it? And so when you are a solopreneur and you don't have any help, it is all on you, right? Yeah. And so then if we are looking to stay as a solopreneur, we may be just documenting so that we can remember. That's a different level of documentation than documenting something for somebody who has never done it, or somebody who's coming in in a different way. So there's levels of documentation that we can talk about. How deep do I go? But then there's also who's going to do it. One of the things that I love is to have if somebody's already in a job, let them document what they do or their part of the process. And then somebody else read it and see if they can do it, which is very similar to the Loom or Zoom or some type of recording. It could be an audio recording if it's something that you do that is verbally based, or it could be some type of a screen capture or screen recording for something that you're doing online. So much easier to do it that way. And then have somebody who knows how to write processes and procedures. Like on your team, you all can take those screen captures and write and know exactly what they're doing. It's funny. So your background is engineering. My background is computer science and software development and workflow management. And I can remember one time we were tasked with writing out the directions, which most people are, of build a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Yep. Well, it's so funny. What do we normally think about? We hit all of the highlights. But I mean, we had to start to, how detailed do you go? Where are we standing in relation to the kitchen? Where is the peanut butter? Where is the jelly? How do I get into the cabinet? How many steps to the cabinet? Do I open the cabinet? Do I shut the cabinet? Where do I put the peanut butter? I take the lid off. I walk back over to the drawer and get a knife or a spoon or whatever it is I'm doing. It can be so detailed that if you even sit and think about how to create or make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, it could be 3 to 4 pages long.
Yeah, for sure.
Or I could take a video and I walk over to the cabinet, get the peanut butter, get the jelly, put one on each side of the bread, however you do it, mix them up in a bowl, whatever your method is to make this PBJ, and I can get it done fast. And so I don't think we think about all the steps and what is really, really involved. We have processes. Here's the other thing other place I want to kind of take this for a minute, Kels. I know I'm probably trashing your questions. We'll come back to them. But here's what's also interesting is I'll hear people say, I don't really do process. And I'm like, yeah, but you do. You just might not recognize it. We sometimes do things that are patterns that really are processes. Think about the pattern or the process of waking up in the morning. What is the first thing that most of us do in the morning? We normally wake up, we get out of the bed, we might turn off an alarm clock, we might take a medicine or something that's sitting on the dresser. If you're me, you're taking out your earplugs and your eye patches so that you have complete silence and dark in your sleep, whatever you're doing. And then most of us walk to the bathroom. And we go to the bathroom, we might brush our teeth, we might put on a robe or slippers, whatever it is we do, paddle down the hall or downstairs and grab a coffee, whatever that morning routine looks like, hop in the shower. But we all have some process that is kind of our rhythm, our pattern, or our process, whether it is documented or not. And I know as well as anybody, if I step outside of that process, I can easily forget to take my medications. I can forget to brush my teeth, which sounds so weird because I moved and did something different. Like there's some things that just get out of order because we didn't follow our process. I know some people their Saturdays and Sundays may look very different than their Mondays through Fridays, right? And so even though we might not see that as a process, it is the process of waking and getting our day started. That's why they have the book, The Miracle Morning, and it talks about redoing those patterns and reclaiming that process. So just starting to think about how processes impact our entire life. So we have a process of how we go to the grocery store. Do you start in the middle? Do you start on the side? Do you start to the left? Do you start to the right? Do you follow your list? Do you write your list in the order of the way the grocery store is laid out, or do you write it and you know how to read around it? I mean, I'm just throwing this out there, but we all have a way that we use and absorb and maintain information. And so if we are running a company, do we need processes? Absolutely. Why do we need them? Because they make our work repeatable. And the more repeatable the work is, the more that we can have an expectation of the outcome and a control or a management of that outcome, which allows us to give the client the product and the service that we sold them because we're managing the process for that outcome. And then where do we start? Somewhere. Usually at one of the big buckets, a big pain point, something that's going awry. If everything's great and perfect, then I think you and I both, a lot of times we start on client experience. So let's make sure that that client is taken care of. Even if we're a little whacked out inside the company, let's make sure that the client never sees it. So if we can take care of all of the touch points with the client, then we can kind of clean up inside so that they don't know anything. Is that fair?
Absolutely. And I think it's important to say there's often many ways to get to the same result. But if everybody's not going the same direction and there's a problem, it's really hard to identify that problem. And that's the first thing we learned in engineering school was we each wrote our peanut butter and jelly process down. And 25 of us, none of us made it the exact same way.
Isn't that crazy?
It is. It's crazy. And if it had not looked the same at the end, we wouldn't have been able to know why, because we all did it different. Right. So understanding, like, that's why creating those standard processes is so important, because when there is an error, you can go back through your process and understand it and fix it for next time. When everybody's doing it different, it's much harder to do those types of things.
So, even in my company, we just missed something for an Instagram story that we were putting out. And I had to track back The person that was supposed to be putting it up didn't put it up.
Mhm.
Well, I went and looked in the folder that she should have been looking in, and it wasn't there. So she can't put up what's not there. Like,
Right.
can't make it up. So why did it not get there? So I tracked back to the person that was supposed to put it there. And I had told that person something, that team member, about a different part of the company using some of the Instagram pieces. And I said, we don't need those anymore. Well, because I didn't look at the SOP at the same time she did, she thought that's what I meant. So she quit providing it.
Yeah.
And I had to go, no. I meant we don't need this piece. We still need this piece. And she's like, oh, no problem. I'll go build them. Built them all, put them right back out there. And there we go again. But what it did was it allowed us to track back to find out where did it used to work. So where did it get broken? And I think that's the beautiful part of it. And then it wasn't punitive. Oh, why didn't you have that Instagram story? It was like, there was a breakdown in the communication around that particular step in the process. I thought we still needed it. You thought I said delete it. And that's why it didn't get done. Let's put it back in. Keep moving. I've just found it to be, you know what? It's interesting. So I was having another conversation this week about with one of my clients who was struggling with a team member. Okay. And we hear that a lot, not because everybody's struggling, but because when we're running these larger companies, these firms with 5, 7, 10 employees, that's a lot of moving pieces and parts and personalities, right?
Yep.
And what we have come up with and seen play out, I don't even remember where the statistic came from. I should look it up, but it was under the idea that 85% of our problems are process-based and only 15% are people-based. But we tend to look at it differently. We tend to say we have 85% of our problems are with people and 15% of our problems are about process. And it's the opposite. And one of the things that we found out in her is when she had a team member who maybe wasn't working at the standard that she needed to work, was instead of going off on the team member, we went back to the process. And I led her back to say, is the process written? Is the process legible and understandable? Like, is it comprehensible? Does she understand it? Does she have the skill set to do what you've asked her to do? Has she been empowered to do it? Like, does she have everything that she needs and she knows what to do and how to do it? Then we can measure the person based on doing the process. But if that underlying process isn't strong enough or solid enough to support the work of that person, right? How in the world do they know what to do, when to do, how to do with clear expectations? And that's what the SOPs are doing, or process is giving us a very clear expectation of what to do, when to do, how to do, and who is doing it. And I think once you've got that so clear, it's almost hard to mess it up, right? Without a small blip here and there.
Absolutely. I think I think it's easy to blame people because it's easier to talk to them. It's easier to see them, especially if you don't have your processes documented.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I'm so passionate about creating them, measuring them, writing them down, sharing them. Mm-hmm. Because like you said, that's a similar statistic to what I've always heard. About 85% of those problems do come from processes that we don't sometimes even know we have.
Sometimes we have an unspoken process. Well, this is just what we do, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. All right. What next question do you have?
So then another thing that clients often ask is, okay, I understand what my client-focused processes are. Mm-hmm. How do I document them and how do I organize them in a way that my team members can use them effectively?
That's a good one. So I think there's more, well, you and I both agree there's more than one way to organize them. I would say first and foremost, again, with a strategy, what are the tools? What is the tech stack that we already have in place in the organization? I am not a big fan of creating more and more and more and more tech. Unless, of course, it's Matrique, and then we always have to add Matrique in. But I'm just not a big fan of just tech for tech's purposes. So I will tell you that a lot of people, they're looking at how do we already keep up with information? So I would say we see a lot of keeping that information in Google, in some
Mhm.
type of spreadsheet or, a folder system, worksheets, documents. We see them keeping it in project management systems like
Mhm.
Asana or a ClickUp or Basecamp or something like that.
Yep.
I've seen some I'd keep mine in Dropbox because that was what we had before all of the Google things like 10 years ago. We had a lot of stuff written out in Dropbox. So anything like that will work. It's almost like, I'll give you a prime example. We have in our home, my husband and I, standard operating procedures for what happens if one of us pass away. That sounds really morbid, but hear me out. Or if both of us pass away, we have directions written down. If we get sick, if something happens,
Yeah.
what to do and how to do it. We have it in a notebook. We also
Mhm.
have it in digital form, and it's
Mhm.
tabbed. Okay.
Yep.
What to do here? What are our medical requirements? What do we want here? This is our last will and testament, all those things. Well, as you know, and I know, I'm getting ready to go on an Alaskan cruise. I'm going to be gone for 2 months. 2 months, Kelcee. Not really 2 weeks, but I'd like to go for 2 months. But I took a picture of where we have that notebook located in our home on a bookshelf. I opened it and took a picture to show everything. And then I sent that picture to my kids. And I said to them, here are the operating procedures if something happens to us while we're gone for 2 weeks. In other words, I documented it. It is organized and it is labeled and it is put in a place where they know to look on a bookshelf. Now, imagine that digitally in our tech. Where is your bookcase that you keep everything for your company? Do you keep everything in an Asana bookcase, a ClickUp bookcase, Google, or Dropbox? Whatever it is, you can always start there. I've interviewed a couple different people for the podcast, Kelcee, that have technology that can keep up with operating procedures and all of that. You can certainly go to the next level, but that is not a requirement to get started. To get started, you could have Word, you could have Google, you can have anything. You just need to start somewhere and write it down.
Yep, absolutely. And I think to add to that, one of the things that we do with your clients a lot that have sometimes overwhelmed them when we started, but have ultimately they've loved it once we've gotten through the process is what like work breakdown structure type processes for organizing. Doesn't have to be complicated. Could be 1 and 1.1 and 1.2 for all of those things that roll up to bucket number 1. Could be 2, 2.1, 2.2 for all those things that roll up. But just having, as you create them, having them in a structure like that, already organized in a way that you can easily search them and find them is going to serve you so well at the end. Instead of getting 100 processes written down and then going back and trying to organize them. So setting up even the simplest of structure prior to writing them will help a ton at the end.
Absolutely. So not only creating that strategy and that structure, but then working within it. And as we said, even at the beginning, starting with the big milestones, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, then you can break those down. I promise you, you can break down anything again and again and again to get more and more. Think about back to the peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I mean, if we've got to get down to how many steps you're going to take to move yourself, because we had code like that, right? Engineering type thing, you got to do how many steps it takes. Well, then that changes based on the size of your foot. I mean, it's right. So just saying, we can get so crazy granular, but we don't have to start there. So it's the structure that allows you to build the granularity into it and then to search it and find it that is really going to make you most successful.
Yes.
This is so fun to geek out on process.
Love it. The next step. So a lot of people are worried because they already don't have time that they're going to spend time doing this and then not use them effectively in their company. So they often come and say, okay, Kelcee, okay, Michele, I'm going to do this. I'm going to create these, but then what? How do I implement them? How do I use them effectively? How do I measure people towards them, processes? How do I do all of that after I've gotten them documented?
Yeah. And it kind of goes back to what we were talking about a minute ago when I said, here's one thing that you do once a year. Now, if you need to document it just so you can remember it, that's one thing. But if you're documenting it just to document it, that's kind of, it can feel useless. It can feel like we're doing something we don't need to do. This is why I would also be careful about going too granular. The more granular you go, the minute something changes, then that SOP is outdated. And so you want to capture the information at a level that it is usable and understandable without being so tightly restrictive that if anything is changed, you've got to redo at least some portion or part. Right. The other thing that I would say is find the processes that matter the most to the success of your company, because those are the ones that we really want to try to document as quickly as possible. What also happens is they should be tied to job descriptions. Like, we need to know who's doing that particular task. We're not just writing down a task because it needs to be done. We're writing it down because we should be able to see a ... assignment to some role or job description within the company. We don't have to assign it to a person's name because the person could change, but we could certainly tie it into a job description to know what that particular responsibility is for that role in your particular firm. So that starts with the who's going to do it and how are we going to manage it. We know who's doing it to know how to manage it. Remember in my description, when I said we were missing an Instagram post, the first thing I'm going to look at is who was the person that was supposed to post it. And I noticed it was missing. Well, now I got to make sure that they were given what they needed to have to be able to post it. And it wasn't there. So then it's not that person's challenge. It's the next person that is responsible for getting it there. And then it tracked back that part of it was miscommunication by me and their understanding. So me communicating and them understanding, that was where the breakdown was that didn't get the work created. But there was a person and a role, a responsibility assigned to the different tasks. So we knew where to go. So then that moves into how do you manage and how do you monitor that? So a couple of things. We set KPIs, right? Key performance indicators. So if this is a process that matters and the junior designer is responsible for getting these selections pulled together, then the only other thing we have to do is put a date to that. And now we know junior designer, selections by September 15th. And there we go. We've got something to measure to because it's time bound and it's realistic and it's all the things that we look at in a SMART goal. So when processes are done really well, they tell us what to do, when to do them, how to do them, who is going to do them. We really have a very 360 view of the importance of that particular task in a company.
Absolutely. So then the next thing that always comes up right after that is how and when do I review them? So I've documented them, I've used them. I think everybody kind of feels like they need to review them when something goes wrong. But I think you and I agree that we don't want to leave them sitting in a binder for 4 years without ever touching them again. So how often do we look at them again after we've documented them to see if there's opportunity for improvement?
Yeah. So I think we can look at them two different ways. One is, how do we recognize when something's broken and review the process? So let's talk about when it breaks and we have to review. That's the one time that you kind of described right there. Or like back to mine, we've got posts that are missing that I know were supposed to be there. So I knew that was a broken point. Let's find out, let's trace back and find out what happened. So that's one thing. And the first thing that happened was, fine, let's update the SOP. The SOP is now updated. It's fixed. We're not going to have that problem again. We might have a different problem, but we're not going to have that one. And so I think it's always good that when something happens that does not go as expected, to ask the question, is this a glitch that happened outside of our firm, our company, our resources? Or is there something that we can trace back and see in our operating procedures if we could have alleviated that pain or disaster or misstep or whatever it is? Where did we miss a checkpoint? Is are we seeing it? Was it a one-off or is it happening more than once? And so now we need to take a step back and ask ourselves, all right, if this is happening more than once, that's usually when I find things, right? You do too. We found it before where my welcome packets weren't being sent out and we found a broken link. But it was only because I onboarded like 3 people within the same month so we could see it and it wasn't a one-time glitch. So sometimes seeing things bubble up 2 or 3 things at a time gives us a warning that we need to start walking backwards to see where something is broken or to see where we can improve a process. So that's one time. The other time is things are going along just wonderfully, right? Or we're not really having a problem in that area. But then when we get to a point where, let's just say there are no major fires burning, I think it's great every 6 months or so, or at a minimum every year, to step back and say, where could we offer process improvement? We've been doing the same thing for the same time. Is there a way we can provide more value, more quality, increase profitability, reduce time? Like, we're starting to think very strategically. That's when we're going to go back and look at our processes, perhaps the largest processes, client engagement processes, the process to actually get the work done, like some type of a workflow or a vendor, relationship. But we're looking at it not from a how do I fix what's broken, but how do I improve a process, maybe through new technology or a new hire or redistributing the work? How can I change things up because we want to improve satisfaction or quality or some other area? But I like every 6 months to every year. I think at least once a year, every process should be at least thought about and reviewed. Is it okay for 1 more year or for 6 more months or whatever? I mean, I don't really look at once a year, let's sit down and comb through that book of every process in the company. A lot of them are going to be touched on the day-to-day. But I think sometimes it's in the moment of taking that hot minute to say, something's not going as planned. Yep, let's put the fire out right now. Let's solve the problem. But let's go ahead and take a moment to think about what could we have done and when would we have known? What question could we have asked? Is there something that could have been done prior to where we are putting out the fire that would have stopped the fire before it caught? That's the question. What do you think?
So I'm very much on the same page. One of the things that I brought into my business from my industrial engineering background was a continuous process improvement mentality. And one of the things that I do to try to not overwhelm myself or my team is I have literally scheduled out our processes over the course of the year. Every 2 weeks, we have 2 processes. And it's a schedule. I mean, you could see it for the next 5 years on our calendars. These are the processes for these 2 weeks. When we have the time to sit down and review those processes, we do. They show up once a year unless there's a problem. And we've broken them down that way for over the course of the year so that we're always looking at something. Sometimes we have 2-week increments where we change nothing because we're happy with the process. It's not broken and that we can't identify any way to do it better, easier, faster, quicker. But there are times in those 2 weeks that we come across a process where we have other ideas and we completely change it because the way we did it last year is not the way we want to do it anymore. Hasn't been a problem, but we have new technology or we have new people who can step in and do things differently. So that's been something that's worked really well for us to not overwhelm us by feeling like we need to sit down and comb through them all at the same time.
We're getting ready to have a big strategic workshop here at Scarlet Thread Consulting that we do every year. And we bring in our clients and past clients, and we do a 2-day in-depth workshop for everybody to build out that next 1, 3, 5-year strategic plan, update those financial budgets and numbers and all the things so that they're walking fresh and clean into the last quarter of the year and then also ready to go in January. And one of the things that I know we both do as well is every 2 weeks based on the process could be overwhelming for some. And so we also help them look at each quarter. What are the areas? Like, let's say that, for example, one way to think about it is, which quarter is going to be looking at client-facing processes. One could be look at order processes. One could be internal communication processes. You can break it up by quarter as well to say, we're going to look for any type of process improvement. Some of my clients, we also, for each individual person, we set some OKRs for them, which are objectives and key results. And we do that as part of the individual goal setting so that each quarter, every person on the team is responsible for reviewing some process that is integral to them getting their job done. And, maybe suggesting an improvement or filling in a hole or approving it as is, but by walking through it and updating it so that, if you had 5 people on the team and everybody did it per quarter for processes that they're engaged in, that's 20 looks at processes.
Yeah.
And that's a huge bit of it because you're looking at it and catching it before it happens. I'll say it this way. How many times, and I bet you it's almost every time, do we hear this when they call us? I am looking to be more proactive instead of reactive. Well, the way that we become proactive is we create processes that we look at in advance. Reactive is when we are having to deal with the fires or deal with the problems of not having a clean process. And so building that cadence of review into your year, your month, your day is what allows you to move from reactive to proactive. And processes where everything starts and ends, to be honest.
And I think there's so much mindset involved, and that's the last thing I want you to touch on. It's hard for people sometimes to slow down and document these processes because they're so busy running their business, bringing in new clients, working with the clients that they have, doing all the different things that designers and workrooms that they need to do as well. So let's talk a little bit about the mindset around taking the time to sit down and work on processes, and where does your head need to be and what do you need to be thinking about, and why is it ultimately high level? Why is it so important for this to happen in people's businesses?
I'm going to start by asking you a question. What name 1 or 2 things that are really important in your life?
My family.
Okay.
My faith.
Okay. Now, let me ask you this, your family and your faith. That's awesome. Those are my 2 as well. If they're important, right, and you understand the value of those 2 things, what do you give them to build relationship or build depth in that time?
Yep.
Okay. So until we realize that processes are important to the success of our business, we will not give them time. We will throw a little bit at it. We'll do a little bit to get by. We'll just, it's an irritant. It's a bother. It's a to-do. It's a task list. And I'm not saying that sometimes even our family and our faith and all those things that we care about can sometimes show up on a task list or a to-do versus a get to do and enjoyment. But when we understand that processes literally are the foundation of running a successful company, to allow us that we've sold it, now let's make a profit. The difference in profitability is process. We get from profitability to order, to get to order to impact, to be able to impact the world, impact our communities, impact our clients, impact the people that work for us, and then move to legacy, where we have that management turn, where we can take a step out of the business and somebody else can step in and we can move more to that CEO, COO level that everybody wants to move to at some point as the principal of the firm. The only way to do those things is if we started off being the one baking the pies, back to E-Myth Revisited. If we started off being the one that baked the pies, we cannot move to bakery owner until we teach somebody to bake the pie. And the only way to do that and to have that pie taste the same every day that that customer comes in is to have a process. X amount of sugar, X amount of flour, whatever it is, we've got to have the process, the recipe. Okay. So the mindset starts by understanding the value, what is important. So when we really understand the importance of proactivity, of getting in front of not being caught on the backside, of managing and maintaining profitability, which gives us sustainability. Once we really get that, then creating and working through our process is a tool that we're using for all the things that we want. So now we're not looking at it as I got to do this or I have to do this. If they say I have to do it, it now becomes this glorious tool that is giving us back our time. It is allowing us to meet the needs of the client in a predictable way. It's giving us sustainability and profitability. Well, my gosh, if you gave me a tool that allowed me to do those things so that I could spend more time with my faith and my family, I'd be there in a hot minute. But until I understand the key of how important that is, there is nothing I can tell you other than to force yourself to do it. And honestly, that sounds miserable to me.
It does sound terrible.
It sounds miserable. Do you see what I mean in that though? So really the mindset is trying to understand why documenting what I do, what I know, who I serve and how I serve them. Why documenting that so that I can have somebody else help me. Or help the company, help the firm, somebody else who can come along and understand what I'm trying to accomplish and do, right? And then help me impact the world or impact my small corner of the world with the brilliance of what our firm brings, whatever it is that you do. The minute that I understand that the only way to bring somebody in to help me is to show them what I do and how I do it so that we can be consistent in doing it, then it becomes, I can't imagine not sharing that with somebody or not having somebody document it. But again, let me say this, if you are not in business by yourself, it is easy to let the other people that work with you help document the parts they know. It doesn't have to be a one-person job. If you are in business for yourself and you want to do that first hire and you don't know how to document, you can reach out to a firm like Kelcee's to say, hey, can I hire somebody to help me document these things? Help me get ready so that I can go work with Michele and blow this thing up. Like, help me, here's a video of what I do and I don't know how to pull it together. There are opportunities to help you pull it together that way. So, I think the biggest thing here is to recognize that processes create the backbone for the company. It would be like, it's like our spinal column. It's the processes that tell the arms and the legs and the brain, this telling all of it what to do and how to do it. And if we don't have that foundation, we call it solid foundation and creating processes and order. And if we just don't have that, then coming in every day is chaotic. When a client calls and says, where are we on this? And you don't even know your own process. So every client is in a different place and position, and you don't even know how to get them through to the next step because you don't know what the next step is. You're just every time refiguring it out on the fly. I can't even tell you the amount of chaos that would cause in your heart and in your mind. And then the sleepless nights and the additional stress. And we keep talking about building businesses with ease instead of with disease. And that's diseased business in that particular example. Processes create ease.
I love that. That was it. Those were all of my questions.
All your burning questions. Awesome. Well, Kelcee, tell everybody where they can find you with Elite Ops if they want to reach out.
You can find us on Instagram at Elite Ops Support. You can email us. Our information will be in the show notes. And you can obviously find us through Scarlet Thread as well. When you work with Michele, you get to work with us, which I love. And we're always here to help.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. What are we going to be talking about next time?
What is I think it's another financial one.
I think it is. I think it's back to money.
I'm excited.
Yay! Awesome. Well, thank you so much for pulling together the questions. And then a reminder to everybody listening, if you have questions that you'd like for us to answer and, send them to team@scarletthreadconsulting.com, and Kelcee will compile them and hand them over to me, and we can answer those on the podcast for you. And as we always say, and as we end almost every podcast, choose to be profitable because profit doesn't happen by accident. Profit is a Choice is proud to be part of the designnetwork.org, where you can discover more design media reaching creative listeners. Thanks for listening, and stay creative and business minded.